This morning we've got 5 speakers speaking to the theme of productive landscapes. So that's productive and resilient communities, enterprises and industries in remote Australia. Each will give about a 10-minute presentation. So first up, I'd like to introduce Andy Bubb, and he's going to talk about some of the early pastoral technology research and development in Ninti 1.
All right, thanks ladies and gentlemen. It's good to be the first speaker. Often people sometimes do go to sleep when I've made the presentation, so hopefully everyone's caffeined up and ready to go. I'm going to be talking about Ninti 1 and the pastoral industry, and I think it's a really good way of demonstrating how our work has impacted on areas that were probably being, maybe not ignored, but they weren't the focus. So we really did put a focus on an area that had previously been left out. I think this is a great way to set the scene. To look at the yellow and orange areas on this map just highlights where we're working in the rangelands. Recognising Australia is the driest continent that's inhabited, and that 81% of the land is arid or semi-arid. So basically what this map is showing us is that the yellow and the red areas, it's just simply a function of rainfall, annual rainfall, and the potential evaporation from those places. So here in Canberra, there's about 630 mils of rain per year. The evaporation is about 1,700 millimetres. In Alice Springs, so right in the middle where we're headquartered, we have about 240 mils of rain a year, but the evaporation is 3,000 millimetres per year. So it's that difference which makes the arid zone completely a different production system from a pastoral sense, as opposed to what we do here in the temperate regions. So just going on a bit further with that, the Australian rangelands, it supported Aboriginal occupancy for at least 40,000 years. And it is, like Tom said, a major source of Australia's exports through mining and agriculture, and also tourism. And so the figures they're significant, the amount of dollars that are earned for the nation from the rangeland areas, and it really does need to be recognised through good research and included in policy and those type of things. Some work that was done back in, I think it was published in 2007 or 2008 by Mark Stafford Smith within the Desert Knowledge CRC was it described desert syndrome, and it kind of looked at how biological systems and communities, there's a lot of things which occur within the deserts and the rangelands that are linking factors that make the rangelands unique. And it meant that there was a different and better way to look at them through research and for policy and other things that come up. So the desert syndrome, you have a highly variable climate, and Digby's going to go into it in more detail later on about climate change and how that's impacting desert regions. But it's accepting that the climate is going to be highly variable. So here in Canberra, we can be pretty sure that it's going to be really cold during the winter. Northern Australia has that guaranteed or near guarantee of a wet season. Whereas the desert regions, you can have those really, really heavy rains and damaging rains, but then they might not come again for many years. So when you're trying to put that into a production system, an agricultural production system, it becomes quite challenging in that, there's an animals that, when the cows have calves, that's when you make the money, but if there's not rain around for years, it can make it really challenging to then try and make an income. Sparse population is another component of deserts and the remoteness, and linking those things together then has impacts for labour force availability for pastoral enterprises. And it's a really significant issue that you do have the issue of, in some communities, some fairly high unemployment, but also there is some challenges in actually attracting labour to pastoral enterprises. Social variability, local knowledge and cultural differences are also part outlined in the desert syndrome, and I'd encourage you to have a look at that paper because it really does capture a lot of things very well. Pastoralism in the rangelands, there's about 3,000 pastoral enterprises and they're huge. They've been around for a long time and it's really probably in contrast to the likes of the mining industry, which goes through a greater boom and bust cycle. The pastoral enterprises, some of them are over 100 years old, so they've been around for a very long time. In terms of where Ninti's work, research and development within the rangelands has traditionally been broken up by state borders. And so you'd have some very different approaches to how the rangelands were being managed. And this was always usually from outside of the rangelands. So I think that by this Desert Knowledge CRC, it had a focus on bringing the groups together and working across the rangelands, but actually initiating the work from within the rangelands, within the desert areas. I think it's probably fair to say that sometimes the rangelands and desert pastoral systems have been viewed as less productive areas of the temperate zones as opposed to highly productive arid zone enterprises. And that's what we really tried to get into with the 21st Century Pastoralism Project. So just going into the actual project now, we were looking at the linkages between remote rangeland enterprises and identified that it really was about a huge scale and a low input, low output system, but it was profitable over a long time. To go down into a little bit more detail, the Alice Springs region, or just to give you some scale, it's about 3,800 square kilometres is the average property, running 6,000 cattle and staffed by 3 to 6 people. So a huge amount of time is spent travelling around those properties, checking on water, providing water, and that was an area that we thought we could have some impact on. So the overall premise of the 21st Century Pastoralism Project was to increase production while reducing costs. And pretty much everything we did came back through this model, and I think it was fairly successful. To go into one of our projects is the Water Smart project, and this was simply, there was commercially available products which could be utilised on enterprises, but they were on the East Coast, and there really hadn't been any early adopters taking up the technology. So what we were able to do through the Water Smart project was to form the linkages between the providers, and some of them were located in Melbourne and Brisbane. Get their gear, we purchased it, put it out on the properties. There was some investment from the properties as well, and we were able to demonstrate that by having remote telemetry systems, so this simply allowed pastoralists to check their waters on the property using radio, they were able to make a significant reduction in their production costs. So just on the graph here, Napperby Station, or these are all commercial enterprises, so it's not a research situation, it's a real world commercial enterprise, and we heard from pastoralists if it went bad. But Napperby was able to pay off the investment through the cost savings in 2 years. Quinnaby in South Australia, it only took them 6 months to recoup the investment. So these were things that were installed, and then the next day after the installation, the property was making more money as a result. So it was a real tangible outcome. One of the other things that we did was develop the remote livestock management system. And going back to some of those desert syndrome ideas, the challenges to pastoral enterprises are a lack of labour, lack of opportunity to see the animals. And this is a case where people get paid per kilogram of beef they produce. But in many production systems, it's still a case that the animals aren't weighed until after slaughter. So there's no weighing during their lifetime. And that was something which we thought could be addressed. So we looked into working out how to integrate some technology and create something new out of things which existed that would provide the benefit to the production or the pastoral enterprises. So just to highlight some of the challenges that you do have on enterprise is that at the moment you use helicopters, and the cost there is probably $300 to $400 an hour for mustering. You've got to have staff out, bring animals in. You can have wild animals, which aren't great to put people in the yards with. And then data collection is quite a slow process at the moment. So to overcome that, we developed the remote livestock management system. Here it comes. Never worked with kids and animals, isn't it? But so the remote livestock management system, Tim Driver's going to go into this in more detail, but I suppose this is a great example of something which was research. We took on the risk of testing it, putting it together and putting it out on a pastoral station, and then as a result of this work, there's now been a commercial company spun off. So we're able to track that process through, and it's a result of that work that the commercial enterprise has now been established. Again, in the idea of bringing some precision into the pastoral enterprises was something we were really keen to do and saw a big opportunity around it. And Sally Lago is going to go into more detail about this. But I suppose the broad concept is that at the moment people don't get to see their animals very often, and what we're moving towards allows people to have greater precision around regularly weighing their animals and also managing them better and matching that up to pasture data which can be remotely sensed. So Sal's going to go into some more detail about the current project and how that's worked. But I suppose a lot of that work had the basis in the 21CP project. So I suppose a couple of the take-home messages from what we found out of the 21CP project was that increasing adoption is really about being out on the ground, and you need to be out amongst the pastoralists to be able to influence their management, learn from them, and create change. So pastoralists are linked strongly to a geographical location. You've got to be out there talking to them to be able to pick up what's going on. In terms of technology, there's a lot of nervousness about taking on new technology, but I think that it's something we learnt was definitely people have to be able to see it and touch it and feel it, and they definitely have to be in a position where they can break it. We had that multiple times, but it really was a huge change, barrier broken down, when that they were able to get the gear, break it, fix it, modify it. And we did have instances where commercial enterprises that were building equipment in Melbourne modified the way they were producing things based on the feedback from the pastoralists involved in our work. Also recognising pastoralists are really time poor and they're continually stretched across many areas of their business. So there's never going to be a scenario where we're going to be able to spend, days upon days with them in a room talking about things. We had to make sure that the way we were giving them information was in an appropriate way, that they could access it quickly and get on with what they needed to do. And also, we found that people were, not surprisingly, it's the way they stayed in business over a very long time in a sometimes sketchy climate, but they were very conservative with their investment. So if we were able to get things out on property, to take some of that risk back to Ninti 1 and Desert Knowledge CRC, we were able to then create some pretty strong business cases and people were able to then take on the gear. And so the telemetry, I think, was a great example of what we were able to achieve with that. The remote livestock management system is being adopted by some researchers now, and there's some significant interest from some pretty big players in the pastoral industry. That's all I've got to say at the moment, but I suppose it's a case of being able to demonstrate that really good, solid research with the industry has brought about some pretty big changes, and I think it looks really positive for the future. Thanks.